Welcome, everybody.
Here we go.
I think we're going.
We're going.
Yeah.
To the Lunchtime
Hey.
live stream part,
Glad to have you with us.
whatever 3 is in French.
We're going.
That's awkward. Becky is unable to be here right now, which means that I have to blunder through it when Becky would do such a great job.
Becky does a great job.
She
Becky,
does.
we're so grateful for you. Sorry you can't be here with us.
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome to the Lunchtime live stream, the place where we engage in dialogue with one another about the kingdom at work in and around the community of Newsong in order to pursue discipleship to Jesus and its application in daily life together.
Nice. Very good. I like it.
Thank you. That just came off the top of my head. So the icebreaker for today, I would like to know. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. Gonna call me out the fact that I'm reading, aren't you?
Don't have to now.
Yeah.
Telling yourself.
Telling myself.
It's good though. It's still good.
Yeah, it is good. So, icebreaker, what's your favorite fall activity? The two of you, the folks at home, favorite fall activity?
And it's definitely fall outside. It's chilly.
It is chilly.
I love to go hiking this time of year. I love to be out and about. So living in the Midwest has been challenging because you have to drive at least 20 minutes to find somewhere to hike. And so we enjoy going to Highland, hiking out there, Pere Marquette. There's a few places in Edwardsville that we've liked to hike. So that, and then I love this time of year to eat chili dogs.
Oh, wow.
I only eat them this time of year. I won't eat them any time of the year. It is a fall activity.
Is it like homemade or
Chili
do you
dogs.
like roll through Sonic?
I've actually never had Sonics.
Wow.
Yeah,
What?
so homemade.
Oh,
Wow.
you never.
Or
You've had Sonic, just
but
not
not
their chili.
the chili
Okay.
dogs.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's
What's
fair.
Sonic?
Oh
Living under a
goodness.
rock.
I don't know that I've got me and favorites. I just
Yes,
really struggle
I know.
with. I struggle with coming down to this is it. And so especially in terms of you focus this on fall activity, I don't know that I've got a favorite fall activity. Even though Saturday we went and spent sort of quite a bit of time in the afternoon. Our family did exploring the village of Elsa, and it was awesome. We had a great time, and it was fall weather, and so I resonate with the being outside. I don't know that I put that in the category of my favorite fall activity. So the closest thing I can come up with, though, was thanks to your comments about your love for chili dogs in the fall, is I would say pretty close to then one of the things I look forward to. So that probably falls in the category of favorite is candy corn. Eating candy corn.
Gross.
I don't know. I've got I only have sweet teeth. I don't have any tooth that's not a sweet tooth, I think. And, so Caleb apparently introduced me to the reality that there are those that are made with actual honey that are much better. I don't have that kind of a discerning palate for sweets. If it's sweet, I'm going to like it. But I'll take his word for it. So there you go. Favorite fall activity, according to this conversation anyway, is eating candy corn.
Oh, that's so gross. I do not like candy corn at all. And I have sweet teeth too, but candy corn's not an actual candy.
It's just soft plastic.
Just corn.
Yeah. It makes me.
A hot dog's not really a dog, so I don't know. You got.
It does make me wonder the important questions, though. Things like candy corn or the pumpkins. I think that matters.
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I'm good with either one.
We'll agree to disagree.
What's your favorite fall activity?
My favorite fall activity, I like the weather a lot.
That's not an activity.
So I would say the first thing that came to mind was wearing sweaters. But that seems lame. So I will say roasting s'mores.
Not nearly as
S'mores.
lame as eating candy corn.
Mine's just you have to put on something anyway, so you might as well just put on a sweater, I guess. You're enjoying an experience.
Putting on a
Candy corn.
But
s'mores,
s'mores.
yeah.
Yes, and if you do a Reese's peanut butter cup instead of a Hershey's, it's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's big brain energy. That's fun. I like that. We'll revisit that maybe next week.
Great.
Continue to talk about fall and how
Can't
it's
wait.
the best. It's the best. Just to recap the sermon scope from this last Sunday, 2 days ago, as it were.
Yeah.
It was really focused on the cultivation of love as an underlying condition, and as arguably the most central one at that, I would say. And love, you defined, is the engagement of the will for what is good.
Yes.
That's good. I like it. You also gave 4 different movements of love, and you said that as I do the work of cultivating love in the soil of my life, it does its work and begins to set me free from fear, pride, shame, and every other destructive underlying condition. That connection of love and freedom, I think, is a really significant one. So I was wondering, would y'all say something more about that? Maybe an experience, a story you've seen or had when love brought an experience of freedom too?
Yeah. Yeah, I can start off with that, and I would add to that definition what was the end of that? That it frees me from those underlying conditions, those fear, shame, guilt, and other destructive underlying conditions and associated feelings. Because again, these things aren't feelings, but they come with attached feelings. And so again, it relates to essentially, as I think about it, in just even my own example of this. For me, this relates to a story that I told Sunday during the live stream. And the pre-recorded, it's not there because I had pre-recorded that before I actually really felt like it was a compelling element to try and put some skin on it, and I didn't have time to go back and redo that. But to tell the story of the troubled relationship with my dad in just a general sense, that essentially led to this gap of relationship with my dad for a number of years. And so, the idea, what I talked about was essentially then at some point choosing to want to pursue a relationship with my dad, to want to love my dad, to engage. I didn't have this language, but it was what I was doing. I wanted to know that I was doing all I could to love my dad, which meant then I had to investigate what are the narratives that are keeping me from that, what are the realities, or what's in my control to do to change that, and how do I change that? Because it is what's good for him, it is what's good for me, and it is what I want for both of us, is a better relationship, and yet I can't control his side of it, I control mine. So it was these literally right foot, left foot over a period of months and years trying to tease out what that is, what it was look like to forgive as opposed to hold on to resentment. And so if I choose forgiveness, which I obviously did, what are the steps to that? So because of all of that, to say it was a long process. It wasn't I need to do this, and it was a couple of weeks, a couple of years, and it was done. So over there, somewhere in the middle of that journey, I did my first funeral for an older gentleman around my dad's age. And I remember, just like I'd had this clarity of thought when somebody had said, "When God thinks of you, he smiles," and I realized I don't have the experience of, I want to in my head believe that's true, but if I'm honest, I don't feel that way. I had the same kind of moment literally, not as I was doing the funeral, but as I was just about to start, and I glanced down and saw him there in the casket beside me. I had this thought pop into my head: when my dad dies, will I miss him? Will I feel grief for his loss? Given the nature of the troubled relationship, and by that point in my own life, the journey to want to not just actively act in love to my dad, but to know that it's bringing about some kind of dimension of feeling of love for him, that it would be accompanied with the positive in a way that if he died with grief, which is the right response, maybe is the way to put it, would it be present in me or would I not? And so I had this sense of fear that it wouldn't be, that I wouldn't be able, when my dad passed away, it would be as if, that's a shame, and I'll miss him, but end there. And so over these years that I was working towards that, I knew I was setting in motion the actions of loving my dad with appropriate boundaries for lots of reasons of what that looks like, to try and all of this be motivated from love, willing his good, and wanting that back from him, and not needing to depend on that because of what he could or couldn't give. In the middle of this journey, then that happened, and so a few years later, my dad suffered a heart attack, and so most of my siblings were able to sort of fly up that same day. We're at the hospital then, right before they took him into to surgery. And so I was standing at the elevator as they're wheeling him in, and I'm looking into the face of my dad, and he's asking for my brother who wasn't able to make it because he's the only one that wasn't there. And so I'm the one then, I'm the oldest son he's looking at, and so, he's expressing, we love you, we're praying for you, and as the elevator doors closed, I had this internal feeling of grief, like he could die. And as sobering as that is, for me, it was, to come back to answer your question, I realized I actually was free from the fear of, will I grieve if my dad dies? I'm free from the shame of what kind of son am I if I don't? I mean, what does that say about what's really underneath this? That I think I've done my best to work at so that it would replace the resentment and the distance and the gap. And I can't close the distance, but I can change the underlying conditions through which I relate to him. And that's the way I would talk about it now, even if I didn't have that language then. And so it was a real moment where it was the confirmation that what I had been doing, the willing the good of my dad in the ways that I knew how to do, had produced the fruit of love in me that surfaced as a feeling of, I love my dad, I'm going to miss him if he dies. It surfaced as, that means I'm going to grieve him. And yet the condition, the reality was there is I no longer am afraid that I'll discover within myself to be some kind of monster, that I'll have the shame of why, I thought I had worked to forgive him. Maybe I really didn't. So for me, it was a very, when I look at it through the lens of what I'm teaching these days, it was a clear picture to me of how love works. How love does its job when I do mine. When I engage my will for the good of the other, love does its work in me, regardless of what the other responds, how the other responds. And my dad took steps this direction, never to the degree that probably he or I would have wanted, but to his capacity and all of that. Again, it's just not faulting him in any way. It's just saying, given that reality, I can see now love did its work to free me from fear and guilt. It wasn't me, because I didn't know that I was free until that moment. And it was a confirmation that my efforts to just keep doing, to have the confidence that I act as if the hope anticipated in the goodness of a relationship that I loved my dad, that we could have a good relationship or loving relationship, was real and reliable, I ran into I lined up with the reality that was real. I actually do love him. It came as a result of the intention to act for his good. So love was that. So that for me was the thing that popped in my head as you asked that question.
Yeah, I think mine is similar in the way that as I think about my journey with my parents, the harsh years of the 17, 18, 19-year-old version of me was, I know better and my parents don't know anything. And so we butt heads all the time. And I was trying to find my own independence and was wrestling with this experience of what felt like conditional love at that point, that they only loved me if I was getting good grades or playing soccer well or was successful. Like that was the only way that I could measure that. And in my own journey of what it means to be a Christ follower and being loved by God, I remember recognizing at one point that their love never felt like enough. Like I felt like they were never measuring up. I had these expectations and they always fell short. And now as a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope my own children don't feel that way about me.
Lots of grace for your folks now, right?
Yes, oh my gosh. So that was the journey of what I was actually processing, was that I didn't feel like I was enough. My worth was so wrapped up in the approval of them that I was so driven by the fear of failure or fear of rejection. And in those college years, had a group of people who were willing to do the work of search for significance and work through some of those false narratives. I remember coming through that with this the belief that my parents were doing the best that they could with what they had, and that was actually good enough. And so I could operate out of a place of forgiving them for things that they fell short on, but recognizing that it's because they're human. And so in that, the glass was flipped. It was not the glass is always half empty and they're never doing enough.
Right. Yeah,
It was
that's
the
great.
glass being half full and being grateful for what they could do. And it shifted our relationship, and especially in those years of struggle where I'm trying to find my own independence.
Yeah, that's great.
I discovered that my relationship with them could free me to love more authentically rather than being frustrated by unmet expectations. And so that was transformational in the way that my relationship with my parents and even my relationship to God in that season of trying to figure out who I am and how He has made me.
No, that's great. I get that.
Yeah. I as I sort of think about it, I think of like, and I'll paint with broad strokes here, but just so much of my own experience and my own sort of like those narratives, those things that went previously unchallenged until I guess love pushed against it, I guess in some way, was that I understand myself to be a very proud person, and not necessarily like, not in a good way, like very prideful, but also have a tendency to shame. And that's a very diabolical combo. But that in Michaela and I's relationship, in particular, in our marriage and like unpacking and working through some of those things that, that shame says, if anybody knew about this, you would be alone. You know what I mean? Everybody would leave if they just knew this one thing. And then those things, how little they actually are in the face of love. That this sort of love frees from things like the grip of that shame that made it feel like such a monstrous thing. But then once, the light of love, it is like, oh, that tiny little thing, like, that's nothing. So yeah, that's very like vague and broad strokes, but that's more for the sake of time. I feel like that's even, even as I think, like, I think it's what we all want. I think we all want, we're designed for love, to be loved and to love. Like, I even think, it's even in Disney's Moana. Like, the whole, the story of Moana in restoring the heart of Te Fiti is the love, is the power of love releasing these underlying conditions in Te Fiti. It's so good.
It is.
It's so good.
It is good. Paul writes, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." I mean, that's another way of understanding the expression of the good life, is that we're free. We're free to be who we were designed to be from the beginning. And so that's why love is the origin of these things. We love because He first loved us. It begins with love. God always then moving towards all of creation, and certainly then that implies us as well, with just willing our good. And so when we line up with that reality, then we are free. We're free from the stuff that keeps us from that experience.
And you even mentioned on Sunday that perfect love casts out fear. And so when that love is pushing out fear, pushing away pride, pushing away guilt, then we can actually receive the freedom that is in there.
Yeah. Because as love grows in us, as we're each talking about sort of being released from these destructive underlying conditions, these destructive elements that sort of where we were living from, guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, whatever they may be, then ultimately they're gone because they're not compatible with love. And so, perfect love being then complete love, the full love, when it's accomplished its fully intended purpose, there is no room for all of these destructive elements. It just doesn't. Love wins, not because it's ultimately they put up a battle, is they don't have an option. It's like light and dark. Darkness is dispelled by light. Turn on the light and darkness has to flee. It can't put up resistance. And so the fuller my experience of willing and receiving love, the completion of love, those four movements I talked about, then what naturally happens is those things are dispelled. They're just not compatible.
Yeah, and as is the four movements, the first, God moves towards us. second that we
return to love.
We return to
God,
love,
basically. Yeah, a response to that. If we understand what it is, I mean, if we can experience that and take it in not just as an intellectual concept or a belief because the Bible tells me so, but experience that, then it is that source from which it opens up this desire. I mean, faith and hope are birthed out of that. Like, is this true? It's your experience in marriage. If I tell you the secret, if you knew who I am and you still love me, there's a lot of faith birthed out of that, and hope that then maybe I'm ready to act as if the goodness in your trusting me with that, or loving me even though you see this, makes me want to get rid of all this other stuff, because this is a better life, if that makes sense. So that's why the response does what it does. It can do no other. If we understand what God is offering when He extends His love towards us, not just as a religious, a system of religion or forgiveness of sin, as important as that is to our relationship with God, that's not ultimately what it boils down to. It ultimately boils down to relationship, God reconciling us to Him. And the nuances of what that involve are important, but it's to feel like I am loved, that I am worthy, that I am accepted as I am. In any relationship where we experience that, we're naturally, it births faith and hope. I want more of this. And depending on the context of commitment in that relationship, how much I need or want or pursue. But that's the wiring of the universe. It's the wiring of our humanity. And so that is the first move. Second move is we return then to love. We naturally are inclined to be drawn to that.
Yeah. It reminds me, a couple weeks ago, in life group, Grant had us do a practice that he sending out to all of life groups. It was a practice of inhale, exhale. That when you inhale, it's love for me, and when I exhale, it's love for you. God's love to me, God's love through me, and I just love that because we're constantly breathing.
Right.
And so as we inhale and experience God's love for us, what we exhale is God's love for you. And so that's what it reminded me of in those first two movements.
Yeah. You can only give from what you have. So if what you're breathing in isn't love, you don't have that to give.
Yeah. So it matters a great deal then that we receive it well.
Yeah.
That we can receive it well.
Yeah.
That we can receive it as reality, as unconditional,
Right.
as abundant. That it's you can't like exhaust God's love.
Right.
So I'm thinking about, are there some practices that either of you have or know of, have heard about, have been helpful, that help ground or center in the experience of being able to receive well that God's love is eternal and abundant and unconditional?
Yeah.
For me, it reminds me, a few years ago, you taught on a Sunday and you had us do an exercise where you handed out stones and we were to write a word on a stone, and I still have mine. And I don't remember the exact prompt of like why writing this word, or maybe it's just a word that connects you to God's love for you, but I wrote worthy. And I think that in Christian tradition, it so often can be a conclusion of we are unworthy, therefore, and we can fill in the blank. Yep. And when I started to grab a hold of that I am worthy of love and belonging, and I love the way that Brene Brown talks about that in order to dispel shame and fear in my own life, that it is the constant reminder of worthy of love and belonging for me. I think that grounds me, that anchors me. It reminds me that I am well loved, even if my experiences around me are not, I'm not feeling loved, right? That as I am enough, and I don't have to fear rejection or fear failure. But that I am worthy. And I think that has helped anchor me, especially as I try to wrestle with, am I operating out of that posture?
Yeah. No, that's good. Where my head goes is essentially back to some of the fundamentals of how we're wired, and that is to receive love. I have to be willing to. I have to choose to. if I'm not ready to choose to, then the practice becomes the internal audit of why is it that I don't choose to? What are the stories that come then with attached feelings that may have been sitting for so long? They created underlying conditions of fear and anxiety, mistrust, that or shame because of something else that happened. And so I don't know what love is. Maybe that's the end result, is I don't really understand what love is. Maybe the love has hurt me, and so I don't want to trust that again. So I think the practice is, if I'm not at a point of saying I want to receive it, can I be at a point of saying I want to receive it, and then begin to do the internal work, whether that's through therapy, whether it's simply just literally from a position of, I mean, it's always helpful to have somebody to do that journey with, that knows you, that can see parts of you that you can't see in yourself, sees the good in you, the capacity in you. And I think that's why we value life groups so much, and why the church, why humanity is meant to do life in relationships, and the church is meant to be this place where we are the crucible intended to forge out what it looks like to love one another. Because when we love one another, then we show what the love of God looks like. It's just incredibly hard. For us individually, then it starts with what's keeping me from loving that. You know, from my journey with my dad, what's keeping me from wanting that to love him. And then the Spirit's job, if I'm open to that question, if I'm honestly wanting to know, that's the Spirit's job, is to, especially as a Christ follower, to trust the Spirit to do His work in me, and then to respond to that, to begin. And it's I guess the third point of that would be to say, to remember, this is a journey. It's not a light switch. This is for me, that journey in terms of relationship with my dad, as I said, was long, and it wasn't because I didn't want it. It was just because I'm only human, and I can only do so much, but the Spirit is the one, Jesus in me is the only one who knows exactly how much I need to see and need to know to keep me moving forward, and not overwhelmed with, oh man, I'm so far from there, why would I keep trying? Or the reality of, oh, I've got this figured out. The Spirit has those moments of prompting, saying, no, you don't. It's when Shelley says to me, maybe you talk about your dad at therapy. I'm thinking, oh, that's in the past. So, I think those are the key issues for me. And that then, once you're on that journey, to keep it present before you, the inhale, exhale is there's 1,000 practices to say, how do I keep this present before me and stay in the committed journey to will to love and to will to receive love. Then you'll have all you need. The promise of Jesus in Matthew 11, yoke to Jesus, is we'll have all we need if we just choose to will that. Engage our will for that, for the receiving of love, for the giving of love. Jesus' job, that's what grace is, to do for us what we can't do for ourselves. And so that's always the place where you start.
There's so much in so little time. And it's all so good. I appreciate you both. Thank you.
Likewise.
Well, thank you.
I was talking to her.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. That makes more sense. For me, I think some of it probably is like personal wiring and things that you are drawn to and interested in, things like that. But something that I've found helpful is to just sit in silence outside. That's something in particular about outside, and if it's too cold or rainy or whatever, to sit by a window and look outside, like from the kitchen table. But to look or be outside and just be silent, to like not have music going, not have phone, but and sometimes it's, for me, it's helpful to like prompt myself of like, where is God? And then, I think that question pretty quickly becomes, well, where is God not? Like, I see God in this little squirrel in the tree, and the fact that this tree grew and it's offering shade, and what a grace that is. And you know what I mean? I feel like it just kind of snowballs at that point. So I think that there is maybe something about like finding something that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your own like wiring and the things that you enjoy, and God probably gave you the enjoyment of those things for a reason. And that God can be found in those things, whatever they are.
No, I agree. to piggyback on that, what you did was you chose to engage that with the will to experience God. Because I can sit in silence and my mind, have all the monkeys jumping around it normally does, and completely miss that God was there. Or I can come to that moment and willing to experience the love of God, and I will. I don't know how, I don't know, so it may be different things. The narratives are different, the expectations, the experiences are different, but that's the commitment. That's what love does. God's love is always pouring out towards us. We just have to posture ourselves in such a way, and so sometimes it may be, slowing down, it may be silence, it may be, listening to music, whatever it is. The point is, if that's what you will, the promise is the love is coming at you, and you just have to posture yourself to receive it. I think it's easier, if you're, and that's why those disciplines are millennia old. Slowing down, hurry is the enemy of spiritual formation. Dallas Willard would say, ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life for that reason, because it's just so easy to hurry and miss. Be still and know that I am God. So I appreciate that. I think it's a powerful practice.
Yep.
Well, with the 0 minutes that we have technically left, I still think it would be good. And you had said in service, I think at least in the in-person service that was live streamed, of the practice of reading 1 Corinthians, substituting the word for love for the definition of love. And Lindsay, I think it would be great to sort of end our time here if you would to read through 1 Corinthians, doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
Oh, you would love to?
I would love to. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not engage my will for what is good, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not will for the good, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not work and will for the good, I gain nothing. To engage my will for what is good is patient, it is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Engaging my will for goodness means I do not delight in evil, but rejoice with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Engaging my will for the good never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and the engagement of my will towards what is good. But the greatest of these is engaging my will for what is good.
It's great.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Amen.
So that's our time. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you to
Thank
you
you
all.
for joining us. Yeah, appreciate that.
Sorry.
We'll see you.
Yeah, look forward to continuing to do this with you. If you don't forget, if you have questions, send them in. Even if we don't get to them today, we'll get to them maybe next time or some other point. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
On Lunchtime live stream.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Is that against the rules?